So we're in the book of Job again this morning. We're in week 2 of our series through the book of Job, which will take about 12 weeks, maybe 13. Depends on how it goes. But if you missed last week, a couple of things. One, if you missed last week, I strongly encourage you to go back and listen to it. You can go to our YouTube channel or our website and see it there, or an awkward clip of it on Instagram. Just go look at it, because I give you some important kind of framework for understanding Job. The book of Job tells us how to read it. And specifically what I told you is that Job's the good guy, and basically everybody else is the bad guy, except for God, right? And that's really important, because I'm going to hold your feet to that framework, that fire, throughout the whole book, because you're going to see Job's friends say some really true things, some beautiful true things. And God's going to condemn them in the end. And then you're going to see Job say some out-of-pocket things. And you're going to say, I don't know about this Job guy. It seems like he's a little out of line. And then you're going to see God come in, who is the final word. Literally in this book, he's the last word. And he says, Job is the good guy. Those guys are a bunch of jerks. And you're going to be left to wrestle with the aftermath of that situation on your understanding of who God is, all right? So that sermon last week is going to be important for you to kind of get there if you missed it. The second thing I want to ask you to do is if you're on one of those really strict daily Bible reading programs, this might mess you up, or you can just read more. But I want to ask you to every week read the section that I preached on that Sunday. Like, read it after I've taught on it. Because what's going to happen, this week won't be this way, but because we have a prologue and an epilogue, that's like the story part that most people are kind of familiar with. In between is the biggest section, and it's the friends and Job kind of arguing back and forth. I'm not going to cover every verse of that section. I'm going to take selections. If I covered every verse, first of all, y'all would get really bored, because it repeats itself a lot. It's one thing just to read it. It's another thing to hear it taught very slowly, right, for like 2 years, okay? So I'm not going to do that. That's how we're going to get it done in like 12 weeks, okay? But it pains me. Maybe it's just the English teacher part of me, but it pains me to skip stuff. So it would make me feel better if I knew that you were reading it, all right? And it will be good for you, all right? So it's not just about me. It's also, it will be good for you. So each week on my notes, I'll have the section I'm covering. You can just read that after that week sometime. You could take, if you're not reading your Bible at all, which I know is most of you, this would be a good way to start, because you've already had a primer on what it's about, so you can read it with some understanding. Or you can add it to your daily Bible thing, or you can take a day and just do this. However you want to work that in, that's just what I want to ask you to do. All right? It'll make me feel better about skipping large chunks as we go along. All right. So, Job chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, which I read last week, tells us that Job is both righteous and extremely blessed. He's the most blessed. He's the richest guy. He's the most righteous guy. And we're told that God has protected him, has put a hedge around him. That word hedge is going to come back in when Job starts to complain. He uses that word against God. But he has a hedge around him that protects him from any harm. Bad stuff doesn't happen to Job because God protects Job. And so Satan comes along. We're going to see what Satan wants to do to him. He's the richest man, and he kind of starts this thing with God in heaven, which we're going to read, that sort of starts this story of calamity coming to Job's life. And we see that Yahweh's assessment of Job from beginning to end is that he is righteous. So let's look at verses 6 through 12. We'll see what plays out in heaven over Job. It says, now there was a day when the sons of God is an interesting word, but it's just angelic divine beings, not God, but angels or angel-like beings, okay? The sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, from where have you come? Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down on it. The Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil? And then Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. And by the way, that word Satan just means accuser with a definite article, so the accuser. Satan is not a name. We've kind of made it into a name, but it's a word that means something. And it means this of the accuser. It's what he does. He walks around accusing, okay? And this is what he does here. He accuses God and he accuses Job of only being righteous and obeying God and being faithful to God and loving God, worshiping God, doing all the right God things, because God has blessed Job. He says, this isn't real. If you take all that stuff away from him, he's going to curse you. This is a strange scene. I don't know if you've ever stopped and thought about it. Like, what is the Satan, the accuser, doing in heaven? What is this group of people that God is talking to? This is a thing that shows up in a lot of places in the Old Testament, that there's this council of heaven, we call it. They're not advising God, but God likes talking about what he wants to do. This is what he does in your life. It's not that weird. What's weird is this guy who's standing there in the presence of God accusing this angel, saying, I don't know, that guy that you're so proud of, God's up there bragging. Have you seen Job? Look at him go. He's so faithful to me. And Satan is cynical. And he says, nah, it's not real. Yahweh brags on him as evidence against the accuser. Some would say that God is actually trying to bring some redemption to the accuser, to say, hey, this is not the way. These creatures actually genuinely love me and I love them. This is not fake. Who knows what his motives are? But the accuser says that Job's worship is only due to the blessings he has. So Yahweh then grants the accuser permission to take away Job's blessings, but he says you can't mess with Job himself. All right? That's the scenario that we have set up. Let's look what happens. Verse 13. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And there came a messenger to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans fell upon them and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Look how this just repeats, one blow after another. There's no break, there's no rest for Job. He just gets hit one after another. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. And while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. And while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, your sons and your daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Then Job arose and tore his robe, shaved his head, and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. So try to put yourself, I know it's awful, but try to put yourself in Job's shoes. Think about all that you have that you consider to be a blessing in your life. You've got kids, you're little kids, or you're not so little kids. The joy that brings you. Think of the house you live in, your 401k, your bank account, every asset you own, every last penny that you have to your name, everything that brings you a sense of security and hope for the future, all of it piled up, and God comes along and sets it on fire, takes it from you. And it happens all at once. This is how suffering, everybody in this room knows this feeling of getting hit one time after another. You're like, I just want to break. Let me catch a breath. Everything is wrong. Everything's falling apart. This is Job's experience times 100. Suddenly and violently, all reference points for your life are stripped away from you, and you have no idea why or when it's going to stop. Job is not in heaven. He does not read the book of Job to know why this is happening. All Job can actually see is the work of Satan. Think about it. The only data he has about what's happening in his life and what it all means is what he sees Satan doing. He does not see God standing above it all. He sees the work of the devil in his life that's just pure destruction. And his response is to fall on his knees and worship. I don't think that would be my response. I think some of you find it easy to identify with the life is easy Job that we read before everything goes wrong, because you've lived a blessed life. Maybe you grew up in a wealthy family or a family that was whole. You've not experienced something like this before. Others of you find it hard to identify with that Job, and you find it easy to identify with everything going wrong, Job. But I want you to see here there's a chain of authority. It's easy to push Job too far and build too much theology on what's happening in heaven, right? But there is at least a hierarchy of wills, you might say. You have God at the top. God is at every point in this story, he is absolutely in charge. No one's doing anything without his permission. But then you also have Satan, who, yes, he's like a dog on a chain, and God's holding the chain, but he's still a mean dog. Look at the destruction he brings. And then you have Job, who at this point feels like a kernel of wheat in the wind, just getting blown around. God has all the authority, but he gives some of that limited authority to the accuser, and then the accuser is the means of God's authority. He's the tool that God uses to bring this into Job's life. As we read this book, we'll eventually see that Yahweh's purpose in this suffering is layered and complex. Here's what I find interesting about this, is you start to feel like, I know why this is happening. But you actually, by the time you get to the end of the book and you see Yahweh start to talk, you realize, oh, I didn't actually understand why this was happening. Even the glimpse we're given into the story of what happens in heaven doesn't give us the whole picture of what's in God's mind. Because God's got other things going on that he's trying to do with Job. So he's dealing with the accuser, and he's going to shut him down. He's going to defend his glory. But also, he's going to get some work done with Job, because we're going to find out Job doesn't understand God. He's righteous, and he's got faith in God, and he trusts God, but he doesn't understand him. There's a huge thing missing of his understanding of who God is and how God sees him and how the world works and how God works. God is complicated. and difficult to understand. Even though we know more than Job, we're still in the dark in so many ways. So Satan goes back to the heavenly council. The story's not over. As if this wasn't bad enough, it's going to get worse. The scene basically repeats, just with new torments for Job. So God asks, like he doesn't know, but God asks the accuser, hey, so how'd it go with Job? You tore apart his life. I let you do what you said you would do. And what was his response? And this is how this goes down. Chapter 2, verse 3 through 10, it says, and Yahweh said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil? He still holds fast his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without reason. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, all that a man has he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in your hand, only spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took a piece of broken pottery with which to scrape himself while he sat in the ashes. The ash heap is where you'd sit when you're mourning the loss of someone you love. He's still in mourning for the loss of his family, and now he's got these crazy sores, and he's sitting there in his sackcloth and ashes, and he's scraping with a sharp piece of pottery the sores on his body. Then what I would consider the third level of suffering, his wife. Verse 9, then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die. Real encourager. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women who would speak. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Who does his wife sound like? Sounds like the accuser, doesn't it? I think it's interesting that Satan left her alive. I think he was going to get more bonuses out of her alive than dead. It's as if she has already aligned herself. She is a mouthpiece for Satan to Job. Because what did Satan want Job to do? What was he hoping for? What was his point? What was the point he's trying to prove with God? His point is he's trying to prove is that if I take this stuff away from him, he will curse you. So he leaves Job's wife there. I don't know what went down there, if she was like this before or if this is a new thing for her, but she aligns herself with the voice of the accuser and goes to Job, and instead of encouraging him to hold his faith, she says, just curse God and die. It's like Satan speaking right through her to Job. In that moment, I'm sure Job said, man, I kind of wish that house had fallen on you too. Not helping. That's a whole other sermon. Don't be that person. That is part of the point of Job, which you're going to see over and over again. It'll be my repeated phrase is don't align yourself with the voice of the accuser. Even when and don't use your theological know-how to do it and to mask it as the voice of God when really it's just Satan. The very first sin in the Bible was gossip. It was an accusation. The same accuser shows up as a snake in the garden, and what does he do? He accuses God of holding out on them. And it's the same thing here. Do not let that voice come out of your mouth to anybody ever. So I want to show you something here that I want to show it to you the long way. We could just read a verse, but I want to show you because I want you to be excited about Job and have some confidence in the way this is written. There's an odd thing happening in the Hebrew in this section that is kind of hidden by your English translation. I just want to unearth it for you. There are 6 places where the Hebrew word barak is used. The word barak means to bless, all right? But almost all of those times when it's used, the word to bless, it actually means to curse. And this has befuddled scholars for a long time. I'm not claiming to be sure that I've answered it, but I think I have, all right? Like, why would he do that? Because the author of Job knows how words work, okay? He knows what the word means. He knows this word means to bless, but he keeps using it to say to curse. And there's a lot of theories about it. I think it's not obvious. I think there's a poetic reason why he's doing it. I want to show you the examples. Chapter 1, verse 5, he says, he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my children have sinned and cursed God or baraked God in their hearts. He means cursed, but the word is blessed. Okay? You've already read all these verses. I'm just pointing it out to you. Verse 10, he says, you have blessed the work of his hands. Also, the word barak. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. Also, the word barak. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. But stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face. Then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. It's over and over and over again, this reversal from between the word he uses and the meaning he intends. Bless or curse. We think of these as opposites. God, you either bless me or you curse me. I have good things that happen to me and bad things that happen to me, and I am deciding which it is. But in verse 10, chapter 2, verse 10, I think this is the key to the reason. This is what it says. He said, but he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women. This is his response to his wife. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil? And all this, Job did not sin with his lips. I think Job, the author of Job, is saying that Job sees both blessing and cursing all coming from God, and it does not matter. It's all from him. Who am I to say I'll only take the good from you, but when you do something that I don't like, when you do something, when there's a curse in my life, when bad things befall me, I'm not going to take that from you. I'm going to assign that to the devil. Nowhere in here is the devil blamed, even though he's the one running around. We do this all the time, don't we? We act like there's the devil and there's God and they're equal. And God's up there wringing his hands. God, I got to outsmart the devil. Maybe I can outsmart him. He's running around. He's messing around with Israel. What am I going to do? I got to get ahead of him. I got to catch him. He's like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. Will you imagine God and Satan working like this in history and in your life? And so then when something bad happens to you, you start rebuking the devil, and you just sort of ignore God. And you imagine God is somewhere else doing something else. This is part of why this story bothers us so much, is we see clearly at the head of all of it is God. And Job sees this at his core. And so when he calls blessing cursing and cursing blessing, it's because he says it in verse 10. Shall we receive good from God and not evil? Blessed be the name of the Lord. Barak be the name of the Lord. Whether disaster or ease, blessing or cursing, it all ultimately comes from God. It almost doesn't matter what our determination is about blessing and cursing, because ultimately God is good and his will is free. This is what Adam and Eve fell into in the garden. What does the tree of the knowledge of good and evil mean? It means I want to decide. I want to eat from that tree and decide what's good and what's evil. I get to decide, not God. Job says, I don't get to decide. God decides what my life looks like. If I have a hedge of protection around me or a hedge of protection closing in on me, which is what he'll say in the next section when he starts to complain. Your hedge is oppressive. It used to be a protection, but now I'm like closed in. It's like a nightmare. This hedge of cursing that's upon me, God, will you relent from this? Because he knows where to go. And I think this is ultimately the challenge of the book of Job is where do you go when the curse falls on your head? That's the question. Job's immediate response here, I think, is exemplary. First thing he does is though Job can only visibly see what the accuser is doing in his life, he still acknowledged that ultimately all things come from God. Blessing and cursing, good days and bad days. I think he actually releases his right to even determine which is which. I think that's next level trust in God. I'm going to put down my right to decide what's good and what's bad. I'm just going to say it's from God. And if it's from God, I'll stand here and accept it. The second thing he does is he worshiped God in his pain. I think it's just flat out incredible that his knee-jerk immediate response in the middle of his trauma is to fall to his knees and worship. What is that? Incredible. So I think this is a starting point, but I want to point out to you this is not the whole story. It's really not. Because there's lament. And I already told you last week, Job does not lament well. He's not good at it. He's got the complaint part down, not the worship God part down. He does a lot of complaining, and God keeps giving him a thumbs up. And he gets more and more intense, and God keeps giving him a thumbs up. Attaboy, I'm here. Let it out. Let me have it. I'll take it. So there's a lot of complaining here. So if you're sitting there going, I'm going through a hard time, this seems unfair. You're supposed to feel that. I'm not scared of you feeling that way, and neither is God. I'm trying to push you a little bit by not giving you easy answers, because there's not an easy answer here. It is true that in Job's case, he was innocent. He is an innocent sufferer. He does nothing to deserve this whatsoever. He will say it over and over and over again to God. This is unjust what you're doing to me. This is not right. I didn't do anything to deserve this. There are people in the world that you bring stuff on yourself. Right? You do dumb things, you break the law, and then you wonder why you got a speeding ticket. Well, it's because you were speeding, right? You can't claim Job's complaint there. You can't be like, cops. It's like, well, you were going really fast. That's not Job. Job is innocent. And he's been declared innocent by God and by Satan and by Job himself. Job knows he's innocent too. And he looks at God and he says, I don't deserve this. You are supposed to feel that. And not just dodge that feeling. Everybody here has felt that. You've just been afraid to say it out loud. And if you read Job and let Job tell you how to read it, you're going to find this over and over again, especially right here in the next section we read next week, where Job begins to lament. His first launch of lament to God, it's pretty tame. I mean, compared to the rest. But he's going to cry out to God, he's going to complain, and you're not going to see a rebuke come from God. You're supposed to join with him in that complaint. So if you've got your holy, I don't complain to God face on, you're going to miss the point. Being super positive is not always faith. Sometimes it's just denial. The Marge Simpson, push it down. The feelings aren't there. Just smile your way through it, right? That's not faith. Job is full of faith when he complains to God. It's an act of worship. Lament is worship, and it is faith. It's just maybe not the way you've thought about faith. So please don't smile your way through this book. Identify with him, and you'll see God answer you as he answers Job. All right, so why don't we stand together and pray? We're going to take communion together, which itself is an act of worship. I want to encourage you. In just a moment, we're going to come get the elements and bring it back to your seat. I want you to bring some complaints to God. Maybe this might shock you. What a weird church. Pastors asking me to complain to God. I'm saying that because I think everybody in here has got a complaint. I mean, my body don't work right. I'm going to complain about that, I think. But to bring that to him, because that's the point. Complaining to your neighbor doesn't do a lot of good. Maybe complaining to your doctor might help a little. But ultimately, God's the one that's got the answers to whatever your lament is. Whatever the thing is that's happening in your life that is broken and beyond your ability to repair. That thing, I want to ask you to bring to the cross. And you lay it before his feet with honesty. And then we're going to take the juice, which represents the blood of Christ shed for you, and the bread, which represents his body broken for you. We're going to take it together and receive him as the answer. Not a simple answer, but him. His presence with you. Well, God, whatever you do in my life, I'm going to ask you to change it. But whether you change it or don't change it, I'm with you and you're with me forever. That's what I need, and you're enough. That's where we end up with Job. So why don't you go, let's get the elements, bring it back to your seat, and then we'll take it together. And then we'll sing one more song. Why don't we stand together, and I'm going to pray, and we'll take this together. God, I think about all the people here just in this church alone who have children that are far from you, children that have been loved by you and loved by their parents, but have turned their backs on it. It's not right. Now we have people in this church that have followed you and served you, and you have filled with your spirit and are faithful friends, faithful servants of the kingdom, and they are dying of awful illnesses. We have people that are continually beset by depression and anxiety and all sorts of mental illnesses. Physical ailments, emotional ailments. God, we bring those things before you right now and we say it's not right. God, we don't understand it. God, I want to see miracles. God, I've seen them before. I've seen miracles in relationships and marriages and friendships and children restored to parents. People far from you restored to you. The prodigals brought home. God, I've witnessed it with my own eyes, and I'm asking you, God, I want to see it again. But God, if you don't, it's enough. You're enough for us because you are the prize. Knowing you is all we need. Being in your presence is all we need. Being unified to you because of your death and resurrection and your ascension into heaven is all we need. And God, we purpose in our hearts once again this morning, sitting in your presence, that no matter what you do, whether blessing or cursing, we receive it from you because we want you. God, we trust your hand in the good days and in the bad days because your hand is steady. It is not double-minded. It is not half-hearted. It is never unsure. It is never wrong. It is always right. It is always good for us and good for your kingdom and good for your glory. So we receive your hand because it is your hand. While at the same time, once again asking you, God, come do yet another miracle in us again. So take the bread as though it was being fed to you by Christ right now, in the name of Jesus. Take the juice, which represents the blood of Christ poured out for you. Take him in once again in the name of Jesus. Amen.